Murder on 54th Street. Hey, just when you thought the days of the mob killing people out in the open on the streets of New York was over, well, along comes a real-life execution of an insurance executive right on the city streets. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Yep, it's what some people are calling, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crimebuster, CharlieCrimebuster.com, and PeacemakerNetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. We got a really good mystery going today. A real-life mystery that's happening in real time. In other words, the shooter is still on the lam. Yep, he's on the run. You might help us catch him. We're going to tell you about that in just a moment. But right now, let me do some housekeeping. I want to first of all invite you to reach out with a shout out. That's right, reach me, Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. You can ask questions. You can make suggestions about other episodes you'd like to hear about. You can even lodge objections and disagree with some of the things that we come up with on the program, because we tell you our opinion. You can disagree. It is a safe spot. CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. We'd like to also invite you to support the program by going on over there to PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. There you can become a badge supporter. You can also be a part of a program that helps those men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. Yeah, we're talking about those first responders out there. How about them? They're wonderful people. We're talking about law enforcement, and of course we're talking about the brave men and women from the military. Read all about that, PeacemakerNetwork.com. And we'd like to also invite you to join us on YouTube every week. James Buckland, our producer, and yours truly, we have a little chit-chat about the episode that we dropped the previous few days. In other words, this episode right now that you're hearing, James and I will be talking about it in just a few days on our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube/Charlie Crimebuster. Now, every one of those links are going to be right there in the show notes. All you have to do is click, and you're already there. So now that we've got some housekeeping out of the way, let's get right into focus on our main story today. It was United Healthcare CEO Brian Thomposon. This guy was shot and killed, and it does appear to be a targeted attack. And just a few days ago, it happened on Wednesday morning. We're dropping this on Sunday night into Monday morning. But on Wednesday morning, outside a Hilton Hotel, right downtown in Midtown Manhattan, there it happened. Please tell us about a 50-year-old CEO, Brian Thomposon, shot once in the back, once in the leg. They, of course, rushed him to the nearest hospital. Happened to be Mount Sinai West Hospital. But sadly, he did not survive his injuries. Now you can imagine how a high-priority murder like this can get the po-po on full alert, right? Yeah, you can be sure they're going all out to catch this killer. Now hold on a moment. Before we do that, let me say what some of you are thinking. Yeah, you may not say it out loud, but I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, well, why is this murder causing all this commotion? Aren't there a lot of murders in a big city like New York City? And you're right. In fact, about approximately 400 people were murdered there in 2023. But thankfully now that is down from some years back when, wow, there were actually several years ago, over 1,900 murders in 1 year in that fair city. But this one gets attention because he was an executive of a large insurance company, United Health. And they were bringing bucks into the city with a conference. And by the way, people will not come and spend their money if they're afraid for their lives. So it is to the credit of New York City for them to keep their streets as safe as possible. And so now it's all hands on deck as the NYPD hunts for Brian's killer. And investigators, they're going all through all kinds of surveillance cameras, and they're tracing that suspect. They're combing through Thompson's phone and social media to see if any of the personal threats that his family reported that he was getting, if any of those might lead us to this shooter. In fact, the commissioner, Jessica Tisch, said at a news conference this past Friday, "I want to be clear. At this time, every indication is that this was," and I'm quoting now, "a premeditated, pre-planned target attack." Authorities went on to say the motive for this murder is currently unknown, but based on the evidence we have so far, it appears that this victim was specifically targeted. But at this point, they're saying they do not know why. And of course, spokesperson for the United Healthcare, they told the news that, well, the shooting took place during the company's investors conference. They were actually going to live stream it right from a hotel ballroom there at the Hilton at 8 o'clock. Of course, you can imagine that was canceled after the shooting. And then the mayor himself, he's got to put his statement out there. He says, again, reminding everybody, this does not appear to be a random act of violence. It was targeted. Even the governor weighed in, called the shooting horrific, and directed the New York State Police to assist the NYPD with all the investigation. Governor went on to say, our hearts are with the family and loved one of Mr. Thompson, and we are committed to ensuring that this perpetrator is brought to justice. That's what the Gov said. So now there is a reason we're getting all these statements from these VIPs. Again, they want to assure New Yorkers that this is not the kind of thing that happens all the time. In other words, people are not in danger. Life can go on as planned. But the real interesting thing about this one, we used to watch on television as these mobsters would gun down one another on the streets of New York City. But that was all actors playing a role. But now, in this day and time, this surveillance video, it actually captured Thompson walking down the street when this unknown suspect appears behind him, takes aim, shoots him once in the back. Thompson falls to the ground. Gunman appears to clear a jam from his gun, fires again. Then the gunman fires a third time and runs across the street. And you can watch this. You can see this right live as it was taking place on the video. So it appears now that our suspect was, well, he was lying in wait, waiting several minutes. Then the victim, of course, Brian, walks toward the conference hotel. And again, he appeared, the shooter, to wait for his target. Now the gunman, he was last seen, according to witnesses and those who saw the videos, wearing a black face mask. Some sort of jacket, it was either brown or cream color. Had black and white sneakers and a gray backpack. They're now telling us that that suspect on Wednesday fled into the alley right behind 54th Street and 55th Street. Rode a bike up to Central Park, where he was seen at 648 on Center Drive. What we're looking at, according to authorities, is a gunman who was thoughtful, prepared, staked out the scene, began by shooting the person in the back. Police said it's not perfect preparation because there was evidence left in the form of the shell casings. Tell you a little bit about that a little later on. And the police also told us that the suspect had actually gone to a Starbucks mere minutes before the shooting. And they did find some surveillance images that just may have captured enough of the suspect's face to run it through facial recognition programs. We're going to find out as the investigation goes. There was even a better shot of the suspect. Tell you about that in a few moments. Now they're also running forensic tests on what they say was a water bottle, maybe a candy bar wrapper that they think that he left there, as well as a discarded cell phone. So, in just a moment now, we're going to do what we do always at Charlie Crimebuster. If you've been following us in the cases that we investigate for you and report to you about, you know that I am big on always finding a timeline. A timeline can speak so much, it speaks volumes about the crime. So we're going to get you an updated timeline in just a moment. But first, I'd like to take just another moment to update you on another case that we've been following. That's the Daniel Penny case. The guy who on the subway came to the rescue of men and women that were up on, and children that were upon that subway train when he got on that train and put people in fear of their lives. And now this guy who came to the rescue is on trial for murder. So here is an update. After several days of deliberation, the judge in the Daniel Penny trial, we now know that the judge dismissed the second-degree manslaughter charge. Because, you see, the jury, they deadlocked on that charge. This is amazing to me in so many different ways. I think that this should have been a straight acquittal. But it is a New York City jury, right? And on top of that, there were 2 attorneys on that jury. So anytime you find attorneys, you're going to have arguing from all sides there. So this does remain a little unclear to us now. I don't really know how it's going to affect deliberation. But now the judge is telling them to go back and focus on the second charge. The first charge, second-degree manslaughter, well, he dismissed that because it was deadlocked. They can come back and charge again. It wasn't dismissed with prejudice. But now the jury is told this next week, when they come back, that they are to deliberate on the other charge. That charge will ultimately determine whether Penny is guilty of criminally negligent homicide in that chokehold death of Jordan Neely. So the jury now is excused for the weekend, and they're supposed to come back next week to deliberate the second charge. And if these deliberations still are stalled, then it may actually become a mistrial if the jury cannot risk or reach a verdict on that remaining charge. So my prediction is that it's going to be a mistrial. I think it's sad. It should be straight acquittal. But we are keeping you up to date, and we will also report on this in the future. In fact, by next week, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have a mistrial declared. There's your update. All right, now it's time to get right back into that timeline. Now, this timeline, interesting enough, begins at least a week before this shooting. On Sunday, November the 24th, we now know that at 10:11 p.m., the unknown shooter, arrived at New York at the Port Authority bus terminal. That was in an area called 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. And that bus, by the way, we know actually started out its route in Atlanta. Now, it should be said that even though the bus started out in Atlanta, according to the records that we have available, we do not know that he got on the bus in Atlanta. He may have gotten on that bus at a number of stops along the way. We do know that there are people saying that at least they saw him on there after Washington, D.C. May have been there before, but they know at least he was on there after the stop at Washington, D.C. And a good way to illustrate this, you know today that if you go fly, sometimes you're going to be routed through Atlanta. Everything goes through Atlanta. There used to be an old joke that when the second coming of Christ comes, it'll probably route us through Atlanta, of all places. But we do know it started there on a bus. The bus started from Atlanta. That was the bus that arrived in New York and that he got off on September the 24th around 10:11 p.m. They then say that he gets into a cab. That cab will take him around to the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel. And there he stays in that area, according to surveillance cameras and reports of witnesses, for about a half an hour. So it's interesting to me that when he gets right there in New York, he goes right there to the hotel. I'm picking up from this that he knew in advance his target would be speaking at the hotel on the day of the shooting. It is interesting that the first place he lands in New York is where he's going to target his victim, Brian Thomposon. Now imagine this. Thompson's home with his family, going on as any other day, maybe seeing the kids as they come home from school, sitting there, hey, I'm going to have a trip next week. Little did he know that there was already a man on the ground there in New York City plotting to end his very life. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine where you are right now, that somewhere, somebody several miles away are waiting and planning on ending your life? So our shooter, we know now that our shooter knew somehow that his target was going to be coming to New York to this conference. He knew it somehow in advance. He knew the very place where he would be speaking at that Hilton Hotel. He knew it in advance. And now he's in town, planning, perhaps even rehearsing the shooting. As we go along with the timeline, now on the 24th of November, he arrives and finds a place to stay at a hostel at 891 Amsterdam Avenue on the Upper West Side of New York there. Next on the public timeline, note I said on the public timeline, because you see, my friend, you and I know that the Popo is no doubt protecting some of these things on their own timeline. So they're going to have a little different timeline than what is released to the public. Now, that doesn't mean our timeline is incorrect. It just means that there are probably some things on their timeline that they're not releasing to the public. But there is something that could confuse you, because on Friday, November the 29th, now remember, he gets there Sunday, November the 24th, but on the 29th, on Friday, the suspect is showing on the list as checking out there at the hostel. You see, but if you look at it carefully, according to authorities, it's not a traditional check-in and check-out kind of thing, whereas if you don't show up at a certain time, they automatically just check you out. They went on to say, we don't believe that he really went someplace else. They believe it was more of an administrative checkout and checking him back in the next day on Saturday. Next is where the police picks up a very, very good clue and shot. In fact, it's actually been called the money shot. That's right, the money shot. You see, there's an interaction when the suspect, the shooter, was checking in at this hostel, making casual conversation. At some point during that conversation with the clerk, he pulls his mask down, smiles at the clerk. And my friend, there is where they get a good shot of his face. Now, folks, we want to take a good look at this shot. We want you to look at this shot. In fact, we're placing the picture on the website. Go to charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com. There you're going to see this picture. It is the best picture of the shooter. We want you to look at it. You may know this person. At this point in our recording, the shooter has not yet been identified or named. If you do know him, contact your authorities. They're going to know what to do. And you should do this as your citizen duty. However, there is a reward that might be available to you. Last time I checked, it was around $10,000. But let me encourage you to take a look at this picture. Go to charliecrimebuster.com. If you haven't already seen it on the web, if you haven't already looked at it, go to charliecrimebuster.com. We have it posted there. The shooter, the New York shooter of this murder on 54th Street. You're going to see his face. You may know him. He may be near you. You may have knowledge of this crime. Now, we're going to get to this crime in just a moment, but right now it's time for us to lighten the load a little bit and take just a moment and share with you what we call our crazy crook of the week. Well, my friend, by now you know that just about everybody's on Facebook and knows what Facebook is all about. And our crazy crooks, they seem to continually become crazy enough to use Facebook to incriminate themselves. This guy is indeed a crazy crook. In fact, we're going to find out what this guy did that's a little different from a lot of people. After proudly uploading his wanted poster on his Facebook profile, well, this man actually got comments on his Facebook mugshot. In fact, one of his friends said, "Nice mugshot." The reply was, "Thanks, buddy." And then the police, of course, used Facebook to track him down, and he was soon arrested. The Stewart Police Department wrote on Facebook, "Well, Facebook's a great way to communicate and connect with old friends and family, especially if you're wanted by the police." And then they said, "By the way, if you're wanted by the police, it's probably not a good idea to use the Wanted of the Week poster of yourself as your profile picture." So this crazy crook, my friend, who used his own wanted poster and used that to post on Facebook, is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crook of the week. All right, now, my friend, back to our main story. We're back into the timeline now. We know that he's already checked in. On Monday, December the 2nd, well, now we have the victim, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thomposon. He arrives in New York. And then he's there right now in New York. He arrives on December the 2nd. Now, keep in mind, our shooter's already been on the ground for over 1 week, lying in wait, if you please. So then we get to the day of the shooting. Wednesday, December the 4th, just this past Wednesday, 5:30 a.m. The shooter leaves his hostel. He's possible that he might have left it by an electric bike. Then it's possible he stashed it away for his planned getaway. At 5:41 a.m., the shooter's seen walking around the vicinity of New York near the Hilton there. And he goes back and forth, walking around, and then he heads to a Starbucks nearby. We have him walking around, walking in vicinity of the hotel, back and forth. Then around 6:17, we find images from Starbucks that shows the suspect buying a bottle of water, 2 energy bars. This is about 30 minutes before the shooting. Then at 6:19, surveillance video near a deli on West 55th Street. It shows the suspect, and it looks like he's walking by, and he's stopping by a pile of trash. At 6:30 a.m., the surveillance video captures what appears to be this same guy on the phone. Now, there was a phone that they found near the site. If that phone is indeed his that they found, this may be something else that the police may know. They may already know who he was talking to while he's waiting for his victim. By now, they may already know who that is and not telling us. Who knows? Maybe he was just pretending to be talking, because today that looks normal, right? But if he was talking on that phone, it would be really interesting to know who he was talking to. And if the cell phone they found near the crime scene was his phone, they perhaps know that by now. It may prove to us that more than one person was a part of this crime. Someone may have known that he was there and knew why he was there. Did he have help? Now, nothing reported on any surveillance while he's there shows us that he had constant contact with someone else during the crime. But did someone participate in the planning beforehand? Or was he just making some excuse to a wife or a partner in life, just lying that he was away on business, when he was actually away to commit murder? Anyway, we all would love to know who he was talking to on that phone at that time. At 6:44 a.m. on Wednesday, well, Thomposon is walking toward the Hilton after leaving his hotel, which was just across the street. The Marriott, I believe. The masked gunman is now lying in wait outside the hotel as Thomposon makes his way to go to this investor conference. The gunman comes up behind Thomposon, shoots him in the back, walks toward Thomposon, continues to shoot, clears a gun jam before firing. This leads us to another clue, the weapon. It appears to be a not-so-common weapon. It's not a Glock, but more like one of those old-time war pistols that the soldiers used to carry. Either it jammed or he had to rack the mag before firing. There appears to be a silencer on the weapon. Now, this weapon, because it's a unique type of weapon for a crime like this, could well be a clue that could lead us to the gunman. We know that perhaps he purchased recently a silencer for the weapon. Who would have a weapon like that right now? There are all kinds of questions that investigators are looking for answers for right now. Another thing, after the shooting, the shooter crosses the street from the Hilton, flees northbound through an alley on 54th and 55th Street, and then gets on an electric bike at 55th Street. It appears he stashed this bike beforehand, and then he heads towards 6th Avenue into the famous Central Park. So question, where did he get this electric bike? We know he did not bring it with him on the bus. This is another opportunity to connect the shooter with a piece of evidence. And another thing the police could well be keeping from us at this moment. So now the shooting has taken place. Patrol officers have responded. They find him on the sidewalk at 6:48. 6:48, at the same time, the suspect seen riding an electric bike in the Central Park. We know Central Park is a great place to hide away. There's woods, there's coverage, place to change his clothes, ditch his backpack, which so readily identifies him. Now, my friend, this guy may not be a professional hitman, but there's definitely planning going into this. And all these things are going to prove that this is a premeditated charge. He certainly will not find the kind of defense of a great emotional disturbance that the sheriff that shot the judge is trying to use to establish in his defense. This guy has planned this out ahead of time. It is premeditated murder. 6:56, he rides out of the park. Now, we do not know when he rode out of the park if he's in the same clothes or not. We do know that it's not, his backpack's not with him because we believe they found his backpack in the park. Surely did not have that with him, but did he have the same clothes or did he change in the park? These are some of the things the police are not telling us. He was seen on the bike at 85th Street, Columbus Avenue, 6:58. Now get this, he was not on that bike for more than 10 minutes, again, trying to shake authorities, not giving them a clear target to what to continue to look for, changing his appearance. At 7 o'clock, he's no longer on the bike, but he is heading northbound on 86th Street. He gets into a cab at 7:04, 7:12. Thomposon, unfortunately, sadly, is pronounced dead at the hospital. 7:30, the suspect is seen near the George Washington Bridge, and get this, the Port Authority bus terminal. And the video, yep, it shows him entering into that bus station terminal. And the authorities say we don't have any video of him exiting, so it is probably well conceived that he got on the bus and went somewhere. Now, just yesterday, when we're recording this podcast on Saturday, on Friday, December the 6th, they found a backpack in Central Park that they believe belongs to the suspect. They immediately sent that to the lab for the lab to go over it. They not revealing what they're finding in the bag, you see. So, now, very quickly, remember, we always talk about in these shooters that there's always these 4 P's that I talk about. Planning, procurement, practice, participation. We know that he spent time planning this shooting. He planned out ahead of time where to stash the bike. He planned out his getaway route ahead of time, all the way getting out of town. In less than 45 minutes, he was on his way out of town. He did all this planning in advance. Planning. Procurement. There were several things he had to procure, gather to make this happen. He had to get the victim's schedule. He knew he would be at this event in advance. How did he know that? Had he already stalked his victim? Was he following social events online? He had to procure the backpack that he was using. He had to procure his weapon, his bike, the mask that he used most of the time. You see, we know again that there was times that he was planning. There were times that he was procuring these things he needed to do the crime. And then we do know that there was practice. Yep. We know there was a whole week while he was on the ground for him to practice his getaway. You know, I'm sure the police right now and authorities are checking those cameras for some other people, maybe other sites or other cameras where they were finding this same person going over the route in advance. I'm talking about prior to the day of the shooting. Back a few days before. What was he doing during that whole week? I believe he was probably practicing his route, how he was going to get away from that crime so quickly and get out of town. He was practicing. And then there is the participation. He was certainly bold. We know there would probably have been a lot of cops in the area because the lighting of the Christmas tree was the very night of the shooting. Certainly police were there in advance. But because he made the hit when he did in the early morning, he was able to move without interference of the police. So, what kind of things are the authorities looking for now? Well, in addition to the backpack, they're looking at those photos with his mask down. They probably have retrieved the bike now, maybe the bottle and the water that he discarded. They're, of course, trying to get DNA. We know that there was a phone that was discarded, the cell phone. We know there was writings on the casings with the words deny, delay, deny. Same words of a book that talked about an insurance and how they get big money and many times won't give us the coverage that people think they need. You see, my friend, I believe that DNA is going to be the key to catching this guy. Because just like Brian Coble in the college killings there in Idaho, they were able to get DNA off that knife sheath, and they were able to trace that DNA to Brian's father, a family member. The same way they can do this here. If he does not turn up, they can now take DNA. If they get DNA off of any of these items, and there's enough there for them to test, they can put that into a base. They can run down family and perhaps get us to this shooter. So here we are, my friend. We have a killer on the loose. The shooter of 54th Street, the murder of 54th Street. He is on the loose. You can help catch him. Let me encourage you again. Go to our website, charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com. And there you can take a look at this guy. You may know him. Let me also invite you to join us this week, a few days from now, when we will further discuss this case. James Buckland and I, we will talk about it on our YouTube channel. Join us, won't you? Charlie Crimebuster /YouTube. Charlie Crimebuster /YouTube. We'll also update you on the Daniel Penny case, and we'll give you the updates available on the sheriff who shot the judge. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster, reminding you we have a killer on the loose. Let's nab him. Let's catch him. Let's put him behind bars. Until this time next time, reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.